On this episode, you'll hear from Rich Airey, a three-time top 20 Leadville finisher, experience in CrossFit endurance, his evolution to ultras, life at the Jersey Shore, and the distinction between under-recovered versus overtrained, and the ultimate importance of strength as a foundation for recovery. All right, before we jump into the episode, just wanted to share some information about Anchor. It's a great free platform for starting out a podcast. It's what I've been using, and it was a great turnkey solution for me to be able to focus on the primary mission of my podcast and not worry as much about how to get the word out, where to post, things of that nature. Anchors takes care of that for you. They distribute, they set up a platform that is easy to use with lots of tutorials. They give recommendations and coaching on how to even interview on your podcast to get you started. So I would encourage you to look into it, download the free Anchor app, or go to anchor.fm to get started. Now, on to the episode. All right, Rich Airey, welcome to the Rest and Recovery podcast, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to be able to reconnect with you. And then, I'm always stoked when I see people that are, into the same things and stuff. So before we connected, I saw, was following you and seeing you posting some of the same stuff and following the same people. So it's always good to geek out on that sort of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was telling my wife beforehand about preparing for the podcast and everything, and talking about you, and I just started thinking back. I mean, we've known each other since early high school, and I started doing the math, which is kind of scary. It's nearly 30 years, and it's nuts. I was thinking back, and I was trying to think about when I was probably freshman cross country, but the running camps.
Yep.
Back in the day.
Yeah, I was thinking about those today as well.
Those were fun times, man.
Yeah, I mean the training with you guys at Colt Camp and having Coach Heath welcome me and let me train in the summer and stuff with you guys, and then continuing that after college, I definitely I learned a lot of stuff about hard work and some of the recovery stuff that we still do today is stuff that we talked about we were doing back in the early 90s, So.
Yeah. There's some things that just, they're just foundational, the basics like sleep, nutrition, and just taking care of yourself that way. But, it's kind of crazy. But, so speaking of which, so back in New Jersey 30 years ago, plus you grew up in Point Pleasant, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And so how did your running career get started?
I was one of those kids back when it really wasn't a thing per se, I guess. I mean, I guess it was out there, but you kind of see it a little bit more now where mom and dad were runners. And so they were still actively racing when I was young, and I would get, dragged to races. And, if I was fortunate enough, an aunt or an uncle or something would tag along and they would watch me. And then when it got to a certain point, they started having those, they had those mile fun runs and stuff like that. And it was just something for me to do, and had success with it and enjoyed it. And I think when you're that age and you have success with something, you kind of gravitate towards it. And being, now at 44, 5'4", 130 pounds on a good day, things like football and basketball really weren't, they weren't into the equation. So things like running and wrestling, where size didn't really matter, or you have a weight class, those were the sports that I stuck to.
Okay. So you did wrestling too. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I qualified for states twice. I finished second and third in Region 6. Probably had, I'd say I probably had close to 80 wins, if not more, in high school.
Wow.
And I actually got recruited more out of high school for wrestling than I did for running.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So running, so we lost contact after high school. So where did and then we reconnected in Monmouth, and we'll get to that in a minute. But what was that evolution to Monmouth to even post where now you're doing ultras?
Yeah, I mean, I went to Monmouth. I transferred to Monmouth. I originally went to Springfield, which at the time was a Division II school. And one, I wasn't super stoked there. And two, I just thought that I was, for better or worse, thought that I was a little bit better than a Division II athlete, and right at that time they had a coaching change, and Coach Joe came on board, and I had transferred to Ocean County College and was running there. And I had some friends that were at Monmouth, like Rich Corcoran was at Monmouth.
Yeah, Dickie.
He's Dickie, yeah. And so we had always been friends through Cole Camp and stuff like that, and he was there, and we were training together at the time, and so he kind of helped Coach Joe along with the recruiting process, and there was potential there with what Coach was doing, and I've always liked being a part of successful teams and stuff. So to have been able to say that I was on the first conference championship team that Coach Joe had ever won, and then now to see that how many he's amassed since I left then, and that was 20 plus years ago, which is even crazy to think about. But
yeah.
So I mean, I ran all through college, and then 20s, I didn't really take things too seriously. Growing up at the Jersey Shore, you learn, for better or worse, how to live a little bit out of control. And so it was being a Jersey Shore kid going to the nightclubs and stuff like that, but I always still was training and stuff. And then started coaching, and then I started taking things a little bit more seriously again. And then you're looking at, all right, I'm a role model, or I'm inspiring or motivating these kids and stuff. So got back into it and started taking it a little bit more seriously. But it wasn't until like 2009 when I really even thought about running a marathon.
Really? So what was the prompt to go do that?
I started doing CrossFit endurance, and was into the methodology, and I'd always kind of been a gym rat because of wrestling, so the strength training kind of went hand in hand, and I like doing that sort of stuff, and decided let's give this a go. Let's see if you can run a marathon, a competitive marathon, with very low volume and a lot more strength and conditioning. So that was what kind of opened the door to the marathon. And then within a year and a half, then it was the first ultra.
Really? So, and which was your first ultra?
So I did the 20 and 24. It was 8.5 mile loop around the Schuylkill River. And I had done it once as a team and had a blast doing it. And so I was living in California at the time, training with Brian McKenzie, and knew that race went on, and also thought it would be a good opportunity to go home and visit everyone. So signed up and went and did that. And that was really the first, the real test of like this whole low volume, high strength and conditioning stuff, and see where it went, and then go from there.
Yeah, it's something I just recently discovered in the last year or so. So with that, during that time frame, it is the Rest and Recovery podcast. So
yeah,
what were the tools you used, the methods you used, whether it became the periodization in the active recovery during those training programs, or even kind of something more intensive? What were some of those methods you used?
Tried and true has always been ice baths. And that was something that I picked up early and was doing that all through college. And so those have always kind of been a mainstay. When I have the opportunity and the ability, I'll do contrast baths, because I feel like those are really, really, really beneficial, and have had a lot of success in build-ups and preparing for ultras with the contrast baths. And then, at that time, I was fortunate enough where I was living and who I was working with and stuff, that I had the opportunity to work with Kelly Starrett multiple times.
Wow.
And got into, the whole mobility watch sort of stuff, and learning how to kind of triage, um, you know, problems and figure out things and prevent them before you have to go to the doctor, or to avoid going to the doctor altogether. So since that time, I've always used like mobility and those sorts of things that, Kelly has provided for the last almost decade now. And then other things along when I have access to them, whether it's either friends that are showing up for races that have the Normatec boots, I'll jump in them. There's a recovery place here in Denver that has the they have compacts, but they have I just said it, the boots,
Yeah,
the compression
Normatec.
boots, Normatec. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I like those. I'll use those. But I mean, the main thing that I've learned in terms of recovery is that there's no such thing as overtraining. There's just under-recovered. And so,
Interesting distinction.
yeah, that was something I picked up in my travels, working in the CrossFit community and stuff. It was a Olympic weightlifting coach, and his philosophy was that there's no such thing as overtraining. There's just under-recovered. And I think that's pretty true, because the times when I've put in big blocks of volume, like say preparing for Leadville, when my recovery's on point, I have no issues like getting out there and doing 85, 90 plus mile weeks, repetitively, like consecutively.
Yeah.
It's when those sorts of things, I don't take care of myself, that's when I feel things, and 60 miles beats me up pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'm sure. So so what does that look like practically? You said if your recovery's on point, what would a week look like for preparing for something like a Leadville or any of those ultras?
When I'm gearing up for, in that build up phase, I'll typically, let's say 2, 3, if I can get there, sessions at the gym. And then when I'm in that phase, it's usually just mostly the power lifts. So squat in various forms, deadlift in various forms, and then various variations of pressing. And then your calisthenic or gymnastic movements like pull-ups. If I could go back in time to my 16-year-old self, the 2 main things I would tell myself would be to do pull-ups and eat vegetables.
There you go. Mom was right.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't until, I can honestly say, it wasn't until I got into my 30s that I really started to intentionally eat vegetables.
And what drove that? Was it something you learned about? Yeah, well, we all know eat your vegetables, but there's some nutritional value for reasons.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah, I mean, you can, if your nutrition is on point, you can recover, you're going to feel better. And that's just part of this evolution too, is just learning, we are an experimental one. And so the more tuned in you are with your body, the more feedback you're going to be able to pay attention to, and so things like dairy, gluten, processed sugar, when you start removing those things and then you reintroduce them, you really start to see how much havoc it wreaks on your body and with your sleep patterns, all those sorts of things. So for me, it's like, I don't sleep well enough as it is. I have sleep apnea. So if those sorts of things, if I remove them from my diet and I'm going to feel better and I'm going to sleep better, then I'm going to do that. And so it was just trial and error. And then also as you remove, especially the processed sugar, like vegetables actually taste good.
It's amazing how good they taste, right?
It's crazy, and so, yeah, I mean, as I've been evolving and removing these things and eating cleaner and being healthier, you just start to see how bad those things are for you, whether it's your mental output, whether it's your sleep. And yeah, like all of a sudden they start tasting better and you're like, oh, I can eat broccoli. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a similar epiphany with Brussels sprouts. I used to never eat
Yeah.
those suckers, but now it's like, I love them. I love them. Yeah. It's amazing how you
Yeah.
just, you stop eating some of that stuff. We went gluten free like 6 years ago, and how it just kind of opens up a new world of flavor, of, just experiencing food and just realizing the depth of food actually is. It's not just stuff to put in your face.
No, it's
And
everything.
consume.
It's everything. And the biggest takeaway for me with gluten, I can deal with the inflammation, I can deal with the GI issues, but for me on the back end, I really find that there's like a mental like dump where I'm not fun to be around for a day or two. I'm not present. I'm in my head. I'm thinking things. Sometimes I'm a little blue. And so for me, like, I'd rather eat a cheeseburger wrapped in lettuce and feel good than have the bun and then for the next day later being miserable.
Yeah. No, I could totally relate. I had the same exact experience, where just kind of that brain fog sets in,
Yeah.
and can't go wrong with a good burger. So circling back to the recovery piece, it seems that, especially preparing for the volume of mileage for Leadville or any of the others out there, how often do you do, some of the different modalities, like a bath? Is it like, do you do that daily, twice a day? Um, do you use compression pants or anything like that to help during the training?
So in the 3 years or 2 of the 3 years that I prepared for Leadville, uh, I was working in Vale. And so at the Vale Athletic Club, they have in their medical room, they have a cold tub and a whirlpool, a hot whirlpool. And so I was going there. I had a membership there, and I would go there every day. And so I would either work out in Leadville, um, or I would go work out in Vale, or hit the gym in Vale. And then every day I would do 10 minutes in the steam room. And then after that, I would do anywhere, depending on what time I had to be to work, I would do anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes of 5-minute contrast. So I would do 5 minutes in the cold and then go 5 minutes in the hot. And I would go back and forth like that for 20 to 30 minutes.
And you could tell, you know, a big difference within yourself, like before you started doing those types of things.
Yeah, because before the first Leadville, I had convinced myself that I was like a low volume guy, and that if I did more than say 60 miles, 65 miles, 70 miles, then I'm really, putting myself in a position where I might pick up an injury, an overuse injury, be it, something with my Achilles tendon or hip pains. And so when I got to Leadville and then did a tour of the Vale Athletic Center and saw that they had this, I was like, here's my membership. And so in those 2 months when I was in Leadville leading up to the 100, I had done, I'd worked up to 100 miles a week. I had run a 50 miler, and then literally a week later did a 32-mile run with a buddy, and like felt fine. And then obviously the first year I went up there and I got seventh.
Wow.
So
That's amazing.
yeah, I
Top
mean,
10 finish. That's awesome.
yeah, I was pretty stoked on it. And, going into that, my main goal was just to finish under 25 hours. That
So,
was the only, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, so the very little I've done marathons, but not the 100 miles. So what is kind of the top runner going to finish in?
So for Leadville, the course record is 15 hours and 42 minutes.
Wow.
That's by Scott Carpenter in 2005. And legend has it that he's the only person that has ever run every single step of the course. So like there's a section, it's a 20-mile section where you go from 40 miles to 50 miles at the turnaround, and then you turn around and go back. But in that section, you go from 9,200 feet to 12,600 feet.
Holy
And
heaven.
so, yeah, so for most everybody, like there's at least parts of that where you have to hike. And Matt Carpenter has been the only person to ever supposedly run the whole course. Rob Carr has gone under 16 hours as well. And then for people that are signing up, like the goal is to get the big buckle, and the big buckle is under 25 hours.
Okay.
They also have a 30-hour finisher cutoff where if you still finish under 30 hours, you get a smaller buckle. But everyone wants like that big rancher cowboy under 25-hour buckle.
Nice. And so I jumped in there, but your 7th place finish, how did you fare on that one?
It was amazing. I mean, that's another thing is one of my things is I don't run with a watch. So I had
me.
no, I don't, I gave up after, so that first year in 2011, when I did the 20 and 24, I also did 2 trail ultras that year. And that was the first trail ultras that I ever did. And before that, really, like coming from the shore, like Holmdel Park or Hartshorn Woods, like that's my headspace of trail running.
Yeah.
And so the first 50K that I did started at 6,000 feet and went 15 and a half miles down the mountain, and then turned around and went 15 and a half miles back up the mountain. So I had my watch, and at one point I looked down and it had taken me like 5 minutes to go a quarter mile. And so coming from the road where, like walking is just like blasphemy, it's like sacrilegious. You don't do it. So that first trail ultra that I did where I had a hike, it was really like humbling to me because I just had never,
a real mental game there.
Yeah. So after that time I took my watch off. And so pretty much, I mean, I'll use Strava and stuff like that, but I don't have any sort of updates or anything. I'll check it and look at it when I get done. But everything that I do, I'm trying to do everything on feel and pay attention to that sensory data. So in Leadville that first year, when I picked up a pacer, he kept asking me, he's like, "Oh, do you want to know what your time is? Do you want to know where you're at?" Da, da, da. And I'm like, "No, I'll find out when I get to the finish line." Like, he's like, "You're doing great. Are you sure you don't want to know?" And I'm like, "No, man. I'm just here to get a big belt buckle." And he looked at his watch and he's like, "I'm pretty sure you're going to do that." And so
nice.
we kept pushing on, and he asked me one more time, and I'm like, "Nah, man, we're almost at the finish. I'll find out soon enough." And so when I got to the finish line, everyone's high-fiving me, and the race directors, they put the medal around me and they give me a hug and everything. And I'm like, "Hey, what place am I in?" And they're like, "Dude, you got 7th."
Dang, that's incredible.
So yeah, it was a good day.
Yeah,
it was a good day for sure.
Good for you, man. I don't know how you live off a watch. I probably look at it too much. But to your point, it's just knowing yourself and really understanding your body, how it interacts, and getting a feel for the road and the pacing.
Yeah, and and that's another kind of in thing now is like with the oxygen advantage and some of the other Wim Hof and some of the other people, like breathing is like the in thing now, but it's really beneficial if you don't use your watch to worry about your pace and let your breathing dictate your pace.
So you mentioned oxygen advantage. So do you use breathing methods?
When I'm running, I do. I try to have a rhythmic, like a 3 or 4 count inhale, exhale. And I try to do everything in and out of my nose, at least for my, when I'm doing my aerobic work. I'm trying to always be nasal breathing. And then in race situations, I know that if I'm running, like this past weekend, I ran a half marathon, and I know that if I'm, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 miles into the race and I'm already mouth breathing, I'm probably already, getting closer and closer to being anaerobic. And, that's not going to do me any good, because once in a half marathon or a road marathon, once you pop, like you've popped.
Right.
At least in an ultra, you can kind of unbonk yourself. You know what I mean? You can take a half hour and sit down and put a cold towel on your head and regroup and get out there and crush it. Like people
Yeah.
do it all the time. You know, like Scott Jurek was like dead to rights at Badwater 135 one year. You know, and he took a half hour, an hour off, and then regrouped and came back and broke the course record.
Yeah. Wow. I never thought about it that way. Yeah. That the marathon is closer to a sprint, and kind of like you were talking about, it's sacrilegious to stop up to the marathon point, or you don't want to for too long, depending on your
Right.
goal.
And if you're getting after it, you know, like if you're, let's just say, even if like qualifying for Boston, like that's a hard effort for almost everyone other than the elites. You know, so you're fueling more on glycogen, you know, and if you're not practicing that and keeping up on with your glycogen intake or your fuel intake, you're going to bonk, you know. And
Yeah.
if you bonk in a marathon, sure, you can suck back a couple gels and maybe drink a cup of Coke, but like that pace that you were at or who you were with, you're not catching them.
Yeah. Yeah. You're done. You're done at that
Over the
point.
course of 100 miles, you know, anything can happen.
Yeah. So for nutrition, how do you fuel out on that course?
Uh, I try to be pretty regimented with my variety. You know, I tend to, like I said before, earlier, eat pretty clean, and I don't necessarily subscribe to say like keto or carnivore or paleo or anything like that. But there are times, like some nights I may just eat a steak. Other nights I just might eat a plate of vegetables. But when it comes to racing, like for an ultra, I'm trying to get in, say, like 150 to 200 calories every hour.
Okay.
And that literally starts at that clock starts at the starting line. You know, like as soon as the gun goes off, an hour in, and you're already putting fuel in. You know, so you have to have a little bit of variety. You can't just do sweet stuff, because over the course
Yeah.
of 15 to 24 to 30 hours, like your body's just not going to be able to deal with all that sugar, and it's going to start coming up. So I'll do beef jerky. Like I love Epic bars, you know, and over the course of
Big fan
100
of the Epic.
miles, I'll put down like 5 or 6 Epic bars over the course of 100 miles,
Okay. Okay.
you know.
Yeah. Those are great.
And then, yeah, they're really good. And then, you know what, it just gets to a certain point where it's just a matter of what's appetizing, you know, at like 70 miles, like when you come into an aid station and all of a sudden you see like a big bowl of potato chips. I mean, it's like, you're talking, you're thinking like it's your last meal, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're famished, or just like you just need a little salt or something to change your palate. So, you know, after say like beyond 50 miles, 60, 70 miles, when you come into an aid station, it's like, you know, sure, you've practiced all this and you have all these, your specific gels and your specific bars and stuff like that. But when you're that late in the race and something is appetizing, you know, like I'm going to take a handful of gummy bears and a handful of Fritos, and I'm going to get out the door. So like it gets to a certain point where like the gloves just come off, and whatever's appetizing and is going to fuel you, like,
Yeah.
let's go.
Yeah. Just fuel up and keep chugging along.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
good.
I was gonna say the best advice I've ever gotten was the week before Leadville. There was a gentleman I was at the Airbnb with, and he was retired Polish Special Forces, and he had done the Leadman series like 5 or 6 times, and he was 60 years old. And in this very
Wow.
thick Polish accent, he said, "If you don't eat and drink, you will die."
Words of wisdom.
Yeah,
Words of wisdom.
it was awesome.
So you mentioned you did some coaching. So where are you taking that now? I think you have a Black Sheep Endurance, right?
Yep. Yeah. So, you know, when I was in the thick of CrossFit, you know, sipping the Kool-Aid pretty hard, you know, it was running WOD. and that was kind of my spin off of lower volume, but not say like CrossFit endurance low volume, and then incorporating strength training into the running, because that was the big takeaway was like there's certain aspects of strength and conditioning that need to be done on a regular basis, but you can still do volume. That was my key takeaway from those 2 years that I spent doing that. And so it evolved into that. And then now after Leadville, the first time, where I definitely would say I've focused more on the running aspect than the strength and conditioning, although I still do that. And so with the coaching, most of the people that I work with now are ultra marathoners, just because that's kind of the world I've been living in the last, 5 or 6, 7 years.
Sure.
But man, if there's someone out there that wants to try to run sub 4 minute mile, I'd love to coach a miler, cause I coached it at the high school level for a decade. I spent some time working with Coach Joe at Monmouth and helping him out.
Okay.
I'm still, I'm on Let's Run every day. It's where I consume my running content. I love all aspects of running. So like when people are like, "Oh, you're an ultra marathoner," I'm like, "No, I'm just a runner." I've already run, I've run 3 5Ks and a 4-mile race already this year. And then I'll run Boston in a couple weeks and the Oklahoma Memorial Marathon the Sunday after that. So I'll have 2 marathons within 6 days.
Oh, wow. Well, I guess you're conditioned for that with all the ultras, but so are you, where are you evolving the coaching from? Are you looking for clients, or are you going back to the school, or?
No, I mean, I like the free flowing format of coaching with, I guess you call them open athletes. I'm not opposed to, coaching at a team. I think knowing what I know now versus what I knew when I started in 1998 coaching high school kids, it would be a much different experience for everyone involved.
Sure.
Now my goal is, longevity, and if I were to coach a group of high school kids, like I want them to have the skill set and the passion to want to do this for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
Sure results are important, and yeah, we want to run fast, but you might be a late bloomer, and it may take you a year or 2 after college to have the right, the success that you think that you're capable of having, and it's unfortunate that we live in this, the world that we live in today, where everything is like such instant gratification and everything is at the click of the fingertips. I mean, I could be sitting here talking to you and I could order my dinner and have it delivered here by the time we finish this,
Yeah.
So, and that was one of the things that I learned as a high schooler too, or looking back on it, was like everything was so results driven. And so like, I learned how to run hard and go hard, and yeah, I got some results, but looking back on it and knowing what I know now, how much, how were those results skewed because I was overtraining all the time.
Right.
And I may not have ever gotten hurt. I may not have ever gotten mono or any of those sorts of things, but clearly, like knowing what I know now, like I was overtraining on my easy runs,
Right. Kind of.
we would show up at the reservoir, and it wasn't uncommon to be running under 6-minute miles for 10 miles with the Bennett brothers and George Kochman and Jim Pilla and, a bunch of other guys, and Dickie would be there, and we would just go out and bang. And it would be like last man standing, like whoever's going to hold their hand in the fire. And that was like
5
5 days a week in the summer.
Yeah.
And so I would just, coaching high school kids now, would just want them to know that like there's more to the results, and even though you may not be satisfied with your results, it's going to come if you're just dedicated and you work hard. But let's work smart too.
Yeah, play the long game. And the other thing too, I think looking back and that you were touching on is the strength element. It was just high volume, intense volume, and no strength. So you had no infrastructure really holding the body together. But that was all of running. It wasn't just where we were in high school. I mean, that's what all the elites were doing too. They were just pounding out the miles with virtually no strength. I think our senior year, we just started doing some semblance of weight training, and it was like circuit training. So it was not
Right.
heavy stuff. Um, to,
Yeah, and it's funny because it's changing now, but I think a lot of endurance athletes live in that world where they're doing, low weight, high volume circuit training, high intensity, CrossFit, Orange Theory, whatever it may be. And they consider that's like strength training. And although when you're starting from zero, sure, you're going to get a little bit stronger, but at the end of the day, like those anaerobic beatdowns are, you don't need those, because if you're doing the right kind of training, you're getting your anaerobic running sport specifically with your intervals or your tempo runs or your threshold intervals or whatever it may be. Like, and those things beat you up a little bit, like a 20, 30, 40-minute high intensity circuit workout is going to leave you way more sore than, say, a 5x5 back squat, or deadlift's a little touchy. That can light you
yeah.
up pretty good if you're putting up some big numbers. But generally, if you're doing things the right way and you're using the percentages, um, you know, it's going to make you feel refreshed and you're going to be able to come back. Whereas a 30-minute, HIIT class, you may be wrecked for 2 or 3 days.
Yeah. Yeah. And that goes similar to the volume. I've been doing marathons for probably the last decade, and only recently discovered, Brian McKenzie, you mentioned him, power speed endurance is his variation now, and been doing that for 9 months. And you mentioned the word refreshed. That's how I feel. I mean, I was doing 50, 60 miles a week, and I was just wasted in every aspect of my life. And now I'm like, I feel the strongest I've ever felt at 44, refreshed, hitting some numbers that I was like mentally thinking I'm not sure I could hit again. And I'm feeling charged up about it. And that refreshed piece is a key element.
Yeah, and I think whenever you add a new stimulus, there's going to be that adaptation, and there's going to be that that rise to the peak. And I think it's just having that variety, and then as you learn through those sorts of things, maybe once through this, as maybe if it levels off, that then maybe that's where the volume comes in. You start slowly, incrementally incorporating a little bit more volume. And then that's where like running a lot in Black Sheep came from, was like, oh man, this stuff is really good. And there's a lot of, I mean, the stuff that I learned, the takeaways were, just the strength training alone, but then having guys like Kelly and Carl Pally and some of those other guys, where it's just in the early days of CrossFit, it was all about movement,
Right.
and how well you were moving and how good your technique was. And then once the rise of the games came around, then it was just about like, let's go smash shit. And people, it wasn't about the movement, and that was
Right.
the key takeaway for me was, okay, we need to get stronger and we need to move better. And so putting those things together, when you have sound mechanics, like you can, like, goes back to, there's no such thing as overtraining, there's under-recover. So like when people are doing that sort of high volume and maybe they get like tendonitis in their knee or, Achilles issues or whatever, that's your body's natural way of telling you you're not moving properly. It's not necessarily, it could be the amount of volume you're doing if you're doing too much volume too soon, but if you're regularly doing that volume and things start to pop up, more than likely it's because you're not moving properly.
Okay.
And that's the thing too with running specifically, is that, running is a skill, just like hitting a baseball, hitting a golf ball, swimming a 400 freestyle, coming out of the starting blocks. There's a technique to it. There's a right way and a wrong way to do it. But because, it's the natural human progression, is that you crawl, then you walk, and then you run, unless you were fortunate enough to work with a really high level coach, most of the time you weren't getting like mechanics instruction.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was always about developing the engine, not developing the chassis.
Right. Yeah, completely agree. Well, Rich, we're running up on time, but before we close out, I had a few final questions for you.
Yeah, shoot.
Um, so first, what are you reading right now? And FYI, Audible counts.
Okay. Um, so right now I have three things in rotation, and I have to be completely honest. I'm actually not reading anything right now. I've been a bit lazy. I have three books that are started, so I'll give you those. The first one I got was Graham Hancock's new book, America Before. And I got that. But then I also had an opportunity to see him speak here in Denver. And so he basically, in an hour and a half, kind of went through his entire book. And it's a bit heady, you know what I mean? So it's, you gotta, have the time to sit down to be able to digest some of his stuff. But I love all of his work. Another good one that he has is Fingerprints of the Gods.
Never heard of these.
Okay, yes. I mean, I could get into it, but that'd be another podcast. But check Graham out. He's got a pretty cool, basis of what Graham is doing in his research is he's saying that we are basically a lost civilization with amnesia, and that structures like the pyramids and Machu Picchu and some of these other Göbekli Tepe. His theory is that these structures were built by advanced civilizations, and then there was this cataclysmic event that kind of wiped out civilization for the most part, and that's kind of where we come in as this hunter-gatherer type that kind of rebuilt and moved into the pyramids. So he's got some pretty interesting things. The other book I have is Swoosh. And Swoosh is the unauthorized biography of Nike's history.
Okay.
And so I got that after all the stuff with Salazar went down. Someone had on some forum it's recommended Swoosh because there's a chapter in Swoosh or a couple parts in Swoosh about Athletics West, which was like the original Oregon project back in the day in the late 70s, early 80s, and sort of kind of Nike's involvement with that. So I wanted to read about that to see if there was anything else in there other than what I already had known. But I mean, it's just a cool story to hear about, Nike coming up through what they did. They may not be, maybe people might not be as stoked or support them as much now, when in today's society, but what Phil Knight did and Bill Bowerman did back in the day was pretty amazing.
Yeah. I mean, that's especially from any perspective, but from running lore, I mean, that's like Vince Lombardi right there.
Absolutely. And then the last one I have is called Boom Days. And that is about the Oklahoma City Thunder moving to Oklahoma.
Cool. All right. What are you listening to right now? Music or podcast?
Oh man, music-wise, I am a house head. I love house music. A lot of times my mood dictates what I listen to, and it kind of runs the gamut from old school like OG country to if Katy Perry's on, I'll bop my head to it. But usually, if I'm picking music to put on, especially if I'm up training, it's going to be like some house music or some other sort of EDM type music. It's just kind of no words and just beats, and you can kind of like get into a rhythm and feel your flow a little bit. And then podcast wise, my favorite podcast for electronic music is called Dance Department. And that's out of the Netherlands. I'm an OG Joe Rogan fan. I've been on board with him since, probably the first 10 ever episodes he recorded. My brother turned me on to him. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then other, in terms of like strength and conditioning and sport performance and stuff like that, I'm a big fan of John Welborn and Power Athlete Radio.
All right. That's a new one. I'll have to check that one out.
Yeah. John is a 10-year NFL veteran. And he used to be involved with CrossFit. He did CrossFit football, and then CrossFit did away with all their specialty seminars. So now he has his own, seminars and lectures and courseworks and stuff for certifications and stuff like that for coaches.
Okay.
And so he's just a wealth of knowledge, and he's definitely someone I look to in terms of content for strength and conditioning and sports and recovery. I'm a wrestler through and through, so I listen to Flow Wrestling Live, and then I like Mario Frioli's Morning Shakeout for running. London Real usually has some good episodes.
Yeah, I've been listening to that one lately.
Yeah. Tim Ferriss, he's usually got some good episodes. Definitely one that I would recommend to go through back into the archives and look at would be Charles Poliquin.
Okay. I will do that.
Yeah. And then if you just want to laugh and you like funny stories, the Honeydew podcast is one of my favorites for just like laughing.
Honeydew. Nice. I'll check that one out. So what's your go-to rest and recovery method?
Ice bath.
Ice bath.
Yep, it's easy. It's convenient. I can fill my tub up with cold water and go to the 7-Eleven around the block and pick up a bag of ice and just get in there. In the wintertime, I don't do cold showers nearly as much as I should, just because the water here in Colorado is pretty cold in the wintertime.
Just go outside.
But yeah, I mean, go-to is definitely ice baths, and then I have my own Compex here at the house. So I'll do that. And then where is it? I've got these things all over the house. So I'll use Mobility Wad, or I have Ready to Run, I think is his running book.
Yeah.
So those are my go-tos. And then obviously just nutrition, if your head hurts, drink water. If your joints hurt, drink water. Supplementation is big too.
Yeah.
Definitely in today's day and age, there's some of our vegetables and stuff just because of farming and whatnot are probably lacking in nutrients. So I'm a believer in supplements and have
do you have a regimen or like a specific go-to?
I have a couple things that I, go to every day. A lot of those I got from Charles Poliquin, who is in that Tim Ferriss podcast. But real quick, daily is first thing in the morning is liquid fish oil.
Okay.
And I would recommend to anyone that is already taking fish oil, if they're consuming it in pill form, that they should get rid of that and they should switch over to liquid.
Why is that?
It's just, it absorbs into the bloodstream faster. You know what I mean? Your body doesn't have to break down the gel capsule.
Okay.
And sense. Usually, like if you're using a really good liquid fish oil, the potency and the amount that you're getting in a teaspoon versus the amount that you would have to take in the capsules to equal that. Like sometimes you might have to take 20, 30 pills a day to equal what you might get in a liquid teaspoon.
Oh, wow. You'd be consuming a lot and buying a whole lot of pills.
Yeah.
So what brand do you use?
I'm a SFH, Stronger, Faster, Healthier.
Okay.
I've been with them pretty much since I started doing the CrossFit and the ultras. I met Patricia back in 2010, and I had been taking capsules before that. And so she was the first one that hipped me to the liquid. And at the time, I didn't eat fish. Like I was like, that was not on the menu at all ever. So like the thought of like taking in a teaspoon or a tablespoon of just liquid fish juice she's like, just trust me. I swear it's not going to be like that. And so they have 5 different flavors. They have a lemon, they have an orange, they have a chocolate, they have a vanilla, and they have a mint. And it's really good. And it's the highest potency. Like it's better than Carlson's, it's better than Nordic Naturals. Like it's third party tested. That's the other thing for people that are, into supplements or taking supplements or thinking about taking supplements. You always want to look to make sure that the stuff is third party tested.
That's great advice. Great advice. Well, cool. So how can people find you?
Black Sheep Endurance is the website for the coaching and all that good stuff. On Twitter and on Facebook, it's just Rich Airey. And then my Instagram handle is 100 Mile Dick. And so that's where the people can find me. I also have Black Sheep Endurance. There's an account for Black Sheep Endurance on Instagram, and that's usually where I'm posting photos of my clients and them at their races and what they're doing, stuff like that.
I dig the jerseys for Black Sheep. Very colorful.
Yeah, that's one of my clients does all that stuff, and so just trying to draw attention to yourself. You know, David Lee Roth said it. It doesn't matter whether you win or lose, but how good you look doing it. So,
little Van Halen quote there.
Oh yeah, it's definitely Van Halen, not Van Hager.
Yeah. Well, Rich, man, great to reconnect. Appreciate your time and joining us here. And
absolutely.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It was great talking to you. Good luck. You run in New Jersey, right?
Yep, April 26th, day before Boston.
Sweet. Well, good luck to you, and hopefully everything works out, and I'll be rooting for you.
Thanks, man.
Vibes out there.
Yeah, appreciate it. All right. Take care.
Bye.